I thought I was saving a desperate mother from losing her disabled son. Instead, I uncovered the procurement fraud that drove my father to sewer slide. When I testified, my mother called me a Judas. I haven't seen her since. Last night, I put flowers on a grave that should have been mine. The smoke was pouring through the vents when the elevator died between floors. I slammed the emergency button, but nothing happened, and my phone showed no bars. Paige's voice cracked through the emergency phone saying, "Hold on, I'm coming for you." I heard her in the shaft climbing the emergency ladder, then metal grinding as she forced the doors open with some tool. She grabbed my arms and yanked me out as my vision went dark. She got me down 8 flights to safety. At the hospital, my boss didn't ask if I was okay, just said, "Paige probably guilted you into staying late because she always avoids going home anyway." He kept talking about how she uses work to escape her responsibilities at home. 2 weeks before, on my first day, HR had cornered me with a warning. Don't mention children around Paige. They said it's a sensitive topic. Then I overheard bathroom gossip about her son and watched conversations die whenever she walked into the break room. Someone showed me a group chat called Real Moms Only with messages about how she just abandoned her son like he was nothing. Every day at 12:47 p.m., Paige ate the same turkey sandwich alone at her desk. She knew every coworker's children and asked about dance recitals and little league games, but got tight smiles and subject changes. She took every holiday shift so parents could be with their families. She organized monthly charity drives for the Children's Hospital and stayed late every night, except Fridays when she left at exactly 5 p.m. The moms forgot to invite her to baby showers and scheduled the Mother's Day potluck during her vacation week. After she saved me, the cruelty escalated. Someone posted in the company chat room that trying to be a hero won't fix abandoning your son. Anonymous messages started sharing public records about custody hearings. Printed articles about mothers who give up disabled children appeared on her desk. 2 weeks after the fire, I found her sobbing in her car after our boss suggested in front of everyone that she transfer to a department without parents for a better cultural fit. She showed me her phone with hundreds of photos, all taken at an assisted living. It was the same little boy. Medical bills covered her passenger seat. She whispered, "I don't make enough even with all the overtime." Then she looked at me with destroyed eyes and said, "He's not abandoned. I'm just not his mother anymore legally." She told me that her ex-husband won full guardianship after they got their son's severe autism diagnosis. The judge ruled she was too emotionally unstable to provide proper care. She gets 1 hour supervised visit per week, Fridays 6 to 7 p.m. She pays for private care after his father all but abandoned him so he won't end up in state housing, even though it takes every cent she makes. "Every single penny goes to him," she said. The next morning, Paige sat at her desk with the same sandwich and same pleasant smile because she needs this job to keep her son out of state care. I confronted Paige the next morning about what I'd discovered. She looked up from her turkey sandwich with those same tired eyes and denied everything. The photos on her phone were of her nephew, she insisted, not her son. Her hands trembled as she closed her laptop and told me I was mistaken about the whole situation. I wanted to believe her, but something felt wrong. That evening, I stayed late finishing a report. The office emptied out around 6, but Paige's car remained in the parking lot. Through the conference room window, I glimpsed her at her desk, hastily packing boxes into a large tote bag. She kept checking over her shoulder while shoving folders and documents inside. When she finally left, she carried 3 overstuffed bags to her car. The next morning's department meeting started with Rachel from accounting announcing her transfer to procurement. Before she spoke, I caught her and Paige exchanging a look of mutual fear across the conference table. It lasted only a second, but something passed between them that made my skin crawl. These two women who supposedly couldn't stand each other suddenly looked like co-conspirators caught in headlights. After the meeting, I stopped by Paige's desk to grab a file. Her calendar caught my eye with different colored stars marking multiple Fridays, not just the 6-7 p.m. slots she'd mentioned. Red stars, blue stars, green stars, scattered across different time blocks. Some Fridays had 3 or 4 stars at various hours. My defense of her started crumbling as I stared at those unexplained markings. The IT manager pulled me aside after lunch. He glanced around nervously before telling me that Paige's computer queries over the past month showed concerning patterns. She'd been accessing vendor files outside her authorization level and downloading procurement data to external drives. He wanted to know if I'd noticed anything suspicious since I sat near her desk. I faced a choice that made my stomach turn. I could investigate Paige's potential fraud or help her make her Friday visit. The evidence pointed toward embezzlement, but her desperation about her son felt genuine. Maybe she was stealing to pay for his care. Maybe helping her meant enabling a crime. I chose to help anyway. Friday afternoon, I offered to drive Paige to her visit. She hesitated before accepting, her fingers drumming anxiously on the steering wheel of her own car as I followed behind. The private care home sat 40 minutes outside town in a converted Victorian house. Inside, a nurse at the reception desk frowned at Paige's arrival. She whispered something about Paige's mother not being on the approved visitor list for 6 months. Paige's face went white as she argued quietly with the nurse. Monday morning, Paige's desk sat empty. By noon, HR sent an email about her termination for performance violations. My phone rang as I read it. My sister's panicked voice filled my ear about a surprise audit hitting her workplace that morning. Oh boy, nothing says typical Monday at the office like getting stuck in a smoky elevator and having your coworker turn into Spider-Man to save you. Paige just casually climbs up the elevator shaft like it's no big deal. Then the boss shows up at the hospital, and instead of asking if they're okay, he starts gossiping about Paige's home life. Real classy move there, chief. Federal investigators were combing through 5 years of procurement records. She kept asking how this could be happening now. Our building's insurance company requested security footage from the fire incident. While reviewing the files, I noticed older recordings being auto-deleted from the system. I managed to recover several before they disappeared completely. One showed Paige meeting with representatives from our biggest vendor after hours in the parking garage. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks ago. She handed over a briefcase and received an envelope in return. I found Paige crying in the supply closet that afternoon. She'd snuck back into the building to retrieve personal items. Her sobs seemed genuine until I noticed her checking her watch mid-breakdown, timing something precisely. She wiped her tears exactly at the 3-minute mark and composed herself like an actress between takes. That evening, my sister called again. She'd found $5,000 cash in her mailbox with a sympathy card signed only with the letter S. No explanation, no return address. Just money she desperately needed for her daughter's medical bills. She wanted to know if I'd sent it, but I hadn't. I stayed after hours going through Paige's abandoned desk drawers. Under a stack of charity drive flyers, I discovered procurement audit files dating back 2 years. The documents showed over $200,000 in suspicious transactions. The pattern suggested systematic like kickbacks, rather than simple theft. Invoice dates clustered around specific medical crises, noted in Paige's personal calendar. Each spike in fraudulent activity corresponded with her son's hospitalizations. Rachel caught me at Paige's desk with the files spread across the surface. Security arrived within minutes of her call, but not before she leaned close and whispered that I didn't understand what I was interfering with. Her breath smelled like peppermint and fear. While researching the vendor connections from home, I discovered something that made my hands shake. Paige's mother was listed as CFO of the company Paige had met in the parking garage, the same company that received those inflated contracts. The pieces started forming a picture I didn't want to see. My research triggered memories I'd buried for years. My father faced false fraud accusations before his sewer slide. Everyone said I was seeing ghosts that weren't there when I defended him. Now the same phrases echoed in my head as I dug deeper into Paige's activities. My objectivity crumbled under the weight of the past. The company Slack showed Paige active in both the Support All Moms channel and Protect Our Kids group. She played different personas in each space, sometimes contradicting herself within hours. In one channel, she lamented being excluded. In the other, she organized events that deliberately excluded certain mothers. My searches for procurement fraud whistleblower protection triggered IT security protocols. Within an hour, legal department emails flooded my inbox about appropriate use of company resources. They knew everything I'd been looking at. Paige controlled our entire vendor approval system, but I discovered she'd been slowly transferring authority to Rachel over the past 6 months. Why would enemies collaborate on something this significant? Their mutual fear at the meeting made more sense now, but raised more questions. 3 nights of investigating left me exhausted. I missed my medication doses and dozed off while driving home. The minor fender bender at a stop sign wouldn't have mattered, except Rachel's husband witnessed it from the car behind me. He took photos and asked repeatedly if I'd been drinking. My work friend Amelia finally admitted the truth over coffee. Rachel had been paying her to document my behavior for months. Every conversation, every mistake, every sign of stress got reported back. She knew I'd get involved with Paige's situation. She'd counted on it from the beginning. The coffee shop employee pulled me aside as I left. Their manager had instructed staff to document any erratic behavior from customers matching my description. The description came from someone matching Rachel's appearance. The entire harassment campaign against Paige had been orchestrated theater with me as the intended audience. Paige's insurance claims for her son's autism diagnosis didn't match the medical coding she'd submitted. The conditions listed were fabricated or exaggerated. Either she'd lied about his diagnosis or she'd committed insurance fraud. Both possibilities made me question everything. My roommate confessed that Paige had offered to pay our rent for 3 months in exchange for information about me. She wanted to know about my father, my mental health history, my work habits. The surveillance went deeper than workplace monitoring. Proving Paige's innocence required accessing systems I had no authorization for. I'd already committed multiple crimes in my investigation. Each step toward the truth pushed me further into illegal territory. I was becoming exactly what I was trying to prevent. Looking through photos on my phone, I realized the candid shot someone took of me at Paige's desk came from Rachel's friend at a suspicious angle. They'd been documenting my involvement from day one. Every move I made had been anticipated and recorded. The final piece clicked into place as I reviewed everything. Both women knew I was the target, not Paige. Her son, the fraud, the workplace drama, all of it was designed to draw me in. But I still didn't understand why. What could they possibly want from me that required such an elaborate setup? My brother's phone buzzed while he showed me vacation photos at lunch. The notification preview displayed Paige dating coach before he swiped it away. He didn't notice my expression change as he continued scrolling through beach pictures. The message preview had included details about our father's old business connections that only family members would know. I excused myself to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed made no sense. My hands shook as I gripped the sink. Back at the table, my brother had already left for his afternoon meetings. That evening, an anonymous email arrived containing my therapy records from after my father's death. The sender had forwarded them to the entire department with a subject line comparing my mental state to my father's final days. My inbox filled with read receipts as coworkers opened the attachment containing my most private moments of grief. The next morning, I arrived early to find my desk had been moved to a corner away from Paige's old station. A young boy sat in the reception area swinging his legs and humming. When I walked past, he looked up and mentioned that Aunt Paige had taught him exactly what to say if anyone asked about his mom. Rachel emerged from the elevator moments later and took his hand. I spent the morning reviewing security footage from the past 6 months. Every confrontation between Paige and the other mothers had been perfectly positioned for the cameras. The angles were too precise to be coincidental. Someone had choreographed every hostile interaction, every tearful breakdown, every moment of workplace cruelty. HR called me in after lunch. The investigation into my behavior had escalated based on complaints from 2 mothers dealing with a private family matter. They presented a file documenting my alleged harassment, complete with timestamps and witness statements. The evidence painted me as an unstable employee fixated on my coworkers' personal lives. Back at my desk, I used Paige's password to access her old email account. The inbox contained correspondence dating back a decade. My father's name appeared in multiple threads, CC'd on procurement discussions with Rachel's mother. The dates aligned with the fraud accusations that had destroyed him. My chest tightened as I read his attempts to expose the same scheme I was now uncovering. I searched social media that night and found photos of Paige and Rachel at family gatherings spanning 10 years. Their children played together at birthday parties and holiday celebrations. The women who supposedly despised each other had been family all along. Every hostile interaction at work had been a performance. The company counselor scheduled a mandatory session the following day. She introduced herself as Dr. Catherine Winters, but I recognized her from Rachel's Instagram posts. They were cousins who vacationed together every summer. Throughout our session, she documented what she called concerning paranoid ideation, while I tried to explain the connections I'd discovered. I attempted to record my next interaction with Rachel using my phone. She noticed immediately and made a comment about me being just like my father, unable to stop digging. When I checked the recording later, my phone had been factory reset. It confirmed someone with administrator access had wiped it remotely during our conversation. The school pickup drama from the previous week suddenly made sense. I'd witnessed what seemed like a custody dispute, but the documentation it created wasn't for Paige's case. My sister's divorce proceedings had taken a turn, and she needed evidence of unstable family members who might seek custody. The entire scene had been staged for legal documentation. The janitor pulled me aside while I worked late one evening. He apologized profusely, explaining that he'd been reporting my movements for 6 months. My father had helped his family years ago, and he felt terrible about the surveillance, but they'd offered him money he couldn't refuse. He mentioned Paige had been asking about my family history since before I'd even started at the company. Rachel appeared in the parking garage as I left that night. She offered to tell me the truth about my father's death if I dropped my investigation. Her offer felt like a trap, but the temptation to finally understand what happened made me hesitate. When I refused, she smiled coldly and said I'd regret that decision. The restraining order arrived 2 days later. Rachel had filed it using my own investigation as evidence of stalking and harassment. The court documents included photos of me at Paige's desk, screenshots of my searches, and witness statements about my erratic behavior. I was ordered to stay away from both women and prohibited from accessing company systems. I researched court records from home and discovered the truth about Paige's son. He was in state custody, not private care. The visits she'd mentioned required supervision due to an unspecified past incident. Her medical visits were actually court-mandated observations. Everything she'd told me about paying for his care had been fabricated. Hidden in the charity donation files on my personal drive, I found a report my father had written before his death. It exposed $1 million procurement fraud involving multiple companies and government contracts. The names matched the vendors Paige had been meeting with. His investigation went deeper than anyone had known. My sister called that night hysterical. She admitted she'd been informing on me since I started investigating. They had evidence about her prescription substance abuse from years ago and threatened to use it in her custody case. She'd been feeding them information to protect her children. Her betrayal cut deep, but her next confession destroyed me completely. She'd driven our father to the bridge that night. He'd called her, desperate and afraid, saying he needed to disappear before they destroyed our family. She'd tried to talk him out of it during the drive, but he was beyond reason. The guilt had been eating her alive for years. She'd betrayed me to keep the secret buried. I started planting false information to map the surveillance network. I told different lies to different people and tracked which ones surfaced where. The web of connections became clear as my disinformation spread through channels I could monitor. Both women had informants throughout the company and my personal life. During an HR meeting about my performance, I faked an amnesia episode. While they scrambled to call medical assistance, I slipped away to the executive floor. The CFO's office was unlocked, and I photographed everything I could find before security arrived. The files showed our entire department had been under federal monitoring since my father's death. A sticky note on one folder read, "High risk hire approved," with my employee ID number. My father's former business partner contacted me through an encrypted message. He claimed my mother had been the real whistleblower, not my father. The revelation made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. He offered to meet, but only if I came alone and told no one. The investigation consumed my life. I missed my sister's custody hearing while chasing leads about the fraud. She lost her children that day. The judge cited family instability and specifically mentioned my recent behavior as a concern. Paige and Rachel had orchestrated this outcome from the beginning. My sister's devastation was part of their plan. My inheritance was frozen the next week. My mother had filed concerns about my mental health with the probate court, supported by documentation from Dr. Catherine Winters. Without access to those funds, I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight the restraining order or help my sister appeal the custody decision. I visited my father's grave seeking clarity. The groundskeeper approached and mentioned he'd been asked to report any visitors to this particular plot. When I pressed him, he admitted his ex-wife had hired him for this specific job. His ex-wife was Paige. Even my father's resting place was under surveillance. The termination letter arrived citing performance issues and violation of company policies. HR produced complaints from my first month that had somehow never been addressed until now. Each complaint was signed by employees who had left the company shortly after. The signatures looked authentic, but the timing was too convenient. I moved in with a friend while trying to piece together what was happening. My mother called to say Paige had been visiting her regularly for emotional support. They'd bonded over their shared experiences with difficult family members. My mother's words were carefully chosen, like she was reading from a script. During one of these visits, my mother finally admitted the truth. She'd discovered my father's involvement in the procurement fraud years ago. The night he died, she'd confronted him with evidence she'd gathered. He'd chosen death over prison, and the shame it would bring our family. Her confession shattered the image I'd held of both my parents. My investigation triggered an audit at my former brother-in-law's company. Federal investigators descended based on anonymous tips about procurement irregularities. Innocent employees lost their jobs as the company folded under scrutiny. Their children asked why I had hurt their daddy's work. I hadn't submitted those tips, but my searches had triggered automated systems. My brother-in-law attempted sewerslide after losing everything. The note blamed me for pursuing a vendetta against mothers trying to protect their families. The local news picked up the story, painting me as a disturbed individual who'd destroyed multiple lives over workplace paranoia. Public opinion turned against me completely. I continued investigating despite the trail of destruction in my wake. Each revelation brought more pain to innocent people caught in the crossfire. I was becoming exactly what my father had feared, someone so obsessed with uncovering truth that I'd lost sight of the damage I caused. Paige found me at a coffee shop one afternoon. She sat across from me and asked what would happen if my father had been wrong about who the real villains were. She produced his early notes from the investigation, pages where he'd praised my mother's integrity and business acumen. The documents suggested he'd changed his theory later, possibly to protect someone else. I admitted to her that I'd broken numerous laws during my investigation. Computer fraud, identity theft, breaking and entering. The list grew longer each day. She listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as if she'd expected this confession. Her calmness unnerved me more than any confrontation. She revealed documents showing my father had known about the procurement scheme from the beginning. He'd been an active participant until things went wrong. When investigators closed in, he'd named Paige's family as scapegoats to protect his own involvement. His sewer slide note, which she somehow had copies of, contained the phrase, "I picked easier targets." An emergency injunction arrived the next day, preventing me from coming within 1,000 feet of any family member, including my own mother. The judge cited a pattern of escalating behavior and potential violence. I was effectively exiled from everyone I'd ever cared about. The isolation felt intentional, designed to break me. Paige visited me one last time to reveal her final secret. She'd loved my father. Their affair had lasted 2 years before his death. She'd helped cover my mother's crimes afterward to protect his memory and our family. Her son's genetic condition had come from my father's side of of the family, a fact that had been carefully hidden from medical records. I needed those sealed records to understand the full truth. My father's old criminal contacts were my only option. I reached out through channels I'd sworn I'd never use, becoming exactly what he'd been accused of. They agreed to help, but their price was continuing his money laundering operations. I convinced my mother's pastor to share his concerns about her mental state. He'd noticed inconsistencies in her stories about my father's death over the years. His willingness to help came from genuine worry, not any payment or threat. It was the first honest interaction I'd had in months. The evidence I needed required threatening to expose Paige's teenage daughter's sealed juvenile records. The girl had been arrested for fraud at 16, following in the family business. Using a child's mistake as leverage made me sick, but I'd crossed too many lines to stop now. I obtained what I needed through blackmail. My minor victory in proving a timeline inconsistency felt hollow as I watched Paige cry over real photos of her son. We'd both been destroyed by protecting others, sacrificing our integrity for people who'd never know the full cost. She looked at me with understanding, recognizing a kindred spirit in mutual destruction. My father's sewer slide note was sealed in evidence from the closed investigation. A federal warrant unsealed it based on new evidence in the procurement case. The note revealed more than anyone expected, implicating dozens of people in a conspiracy that reached beyond our small company. Everyone wanted to bury it again. Everything now depended on testimony from my father's former partner, who'd been in hiding since the night of his death. He held the key to understanding why my father had chosen death over exposure. Finding him would require resources I no longer had, and allies who'd all been turned against me. The investigation had led me to this moment of complete isolation, exactly where Paige and Rachel had wanted me from the beginning. The meeting location my father's former partner chose made my skin crawl. An abandoned warehouse near the docks where my father had conducted business decades ago. I arrived early and waited in my car, watching for any sign of movement. Sebastian emerged from the shadows exactly at midnight, his face gaunt from years of hiding. He handed me a flash drive containing recordings my father had made in his final weeks. The audio files revealed my father's growing paranoia as the federal investigation closed in. He'd been recording everyone, including my mother, trying to gather evidence to save himself. Sebastian explained that my father had planned to testify against everyone involved, including his own family, in exchange for immunity. The murder happened 3 days later. Sebastian's body washed up on the riverbank with signs of professional execution. The police questioned me for hours since I'd been the last person to contact him. My alibi held because I'd been in a holding cell for violating the restraining order at the exact time of death. The timing felt too convenient to be coincidental. Federal agents arrived at my friend's apartment the next morning. They'd been monitoring my investigation since my father's death, waiting for me to uncover what he'd hidden. The lead agent showed me surveillance photos of every meeting, every search, every desperate attempt to find the truth. They knew about the flash drive Sebastian had given me. The recordings on the drive revealed more than just my father's paranoia. Hidden among the files was evidence that he'd been preparing to testify in a massive federal case involving procurement fraud across multiple states. The question of who he planned to testify against remained unclear. Multiple voices on the recordings expressed desire to silence him permanently. My father's handler from the federal investigation agreed to meet after Sebastian's murder. She produced additional recordings suggesting at least 5 different suspects had motive to kill my father. Government officials, business partners, even family members all had reasons to want him silenced. The scope of potential suspects made finding the truth nearly impossible. I retrieved the final piece of evidence from a storage unit my father had rented under an alias. Paige had been maintaining the payments for years, keeping his secrets safe. Inside, I found boxes of documents, recordings, and photographs dating back to my childhood. The evidence painted a picture of systematic corruption that my father had both participated in and documented. Among the files were recordings of me as a child. My father's voice apologized for what was coming, explaining that he'd been grooming me since age 7 to eventually testify. He'd planted memories, created situations, and carefully orchestrated my entire childhood to make me the perfect witness. The realization that my entire life had been engineered made me physically ill. I made the decision to expose everything, knowing it would mean my mother's life imprisonment. The evidence clearly showed her involvement in the procurement fraud and possibly my father's death. My choice came down to protecting a murderer or honoring the truth my father had died trying to reveal. Rachel's deposition at the federal building revealed the final piece of the puzzle. She and Paige had been cooperating with federal investigators for 3 years. Their immunity agreements predated my employment at the company. Every interaction, every moment of workplace drama had been part of their cooperation agreement. They'd been tasked with drawing out other conspirators. The federal investigation had monitored me since childhood, using my father's plan against itself. They'd watched me grow up, waiting for the moment I'd be useful. Paige's tears had been genuine because she knew where this path would lead. She'd been forced to participate in destroying another family while protecting her own. 3 key relationships in my life had been federal informants. My college roommate, my first boss, and my therapist had all reported on me for years. Others in my life had been unaware participants in a decades-long operation. So basically, everyone in this poor person's life was secretly working for the feds, except maybe their barista and the guy who delivers their mail. Though at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if the mailman was wearing a wire too. Rachel and Paige being undercover for 3 years means all that office drama was basically community theater funded by the government. The scope of deception surrounding my entire existence defied comprehension. Both sides prepared for the federal trial where I would testify against my mother. The prosecution built their case on the evidence I'd uncovered, while the defense prepared to paint me as an unreliable witness corrupted by federal manipulation. The trial would determine not just my mother's fate, but the validity of my entire life's purpose. The courtroom filled with familiar faces on the first day of testimony. 5 people I'd trusted throughout my life appeared as witnesses or revealed themselves as informants. My childhood teacher provided an alibi for my mother, claiming they'd been together the night of my father's death. Each revelation chipped away at my sense of reality. The physical collapse came during the 3rd day of testimony. The weight of discovering the complete fabrication of my life overwhelmed my body. Paramedics carried me from the witness stand while the judge called a recess. The prosecution worried their star witness might not survive to complete testimony. From my hospital bed, the truth finally emerged in its entirety. My father had recruited me at age 7, feeding me specific information and shaping my memories to create the perfect future witness. Every birthday party, every family vacation, every seemingly normal childhood moment had been carefully orchestrated for eventual testimony. My mother's defense team revealed during cross-examination that I'd committed numerous crimes the FBI hadn't authorized during my investigation. Hacking, blackmail, identity theft. The list of charges against me grew longer each day. My mother's attorney argued that I'd become exactly what they'd pretended she was, a criminal willing to destroy lives for personal vengeance. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation to determine my competency to testify. 3 different psychiatrists examined me over 2 weeks, trying to separate genuine memories from planted ones. Their reports conflicted on whether I could provide reliable testimony given the extensive manipulation I'd endured. The breakthrough came when prosecutors authenticated a recording from my father's car. The audio clearly captured my mother confessing to his murder while he drove toward the bridge. She'd discovered his plan to testify and decided to silence him permanently. The recording revealed she hadn't known about the hidden microphone that captured her confession. The evidence proved murder, but also exposed my father's psychological torture of our family. He'd documented every manipulation, every lie, every moment of emotional abuse he'd inflicted on us. Both my parents had been monsters in their own ways, using their children as pawns in their criminal enterprises. Paige's breakdown on the witness stand revealed the final secret. Her son's father wasn't her ex-husband, but my father's business partner, the same one she'd been paying for years. The genetic condition had come from that relationship, not her ex-husband. She'd been protecting multiple secrets while trying to provide for a child born from an affair with a criminal. The prosecutor offered me a choice: accept immunity in exchange for full testimony, or face prosecution for the unauthorized crimes I'd committed during my investigation. The decision tortured me for days. Immunity meant freedom, but also completing my father's plan. Prosecution meant prison, but rejecting his lifelong manipulation. I chose to testify fully, accepting that prison would follow. Truth mattered more than my freedom. I gave detailed testimony about everything I'd discovered, holding nothing back. The jury needed to understand the full scope of corruption that had destroyed multiple families across generations. The testimony lasted 2 weeks. I detailed every crime, every cover-up, every moment of manipulation I'd uncovered. My mother sat across the courtroom, her face a mask of cold fury as I dismantled the lies she'd built. The prosecution used my evidence to build an airtight case against her and dozens of co-conspirators. After my testimony concluded, I accepted a plea deal for obstruction of justice. I destroyed evidence that would have implicated my sister in minor crimes. The prosecutor agreed to a reduced sentence in exchange for my cooperation. My choice to protect my sister meant accepting responsibility for interfering with the investigation. The community divided sharply over my actions. Some saw me as a tragic victim of lifelong manipulation who'd been forced into an impossible situation. Others viewed me as a dangerous vigilante who'd destroyed innocent lives while pursuing a personal vendetta. The local news covered the trial extensively, debating whether I was hero or villain. My story became a true crime sensation, with podcasts and documentaries exploring the federal use of children as long-term assets. The attention felt like another form of imprisonment, trapping me in a narrative I'd never chosen. People analyzed every aspect of my life, looking for signs they could have spotted the manipulation. During my incarceration, I wrote extensively about the FBI's practice of grooming child witnesses. The Bureau's systematic approach to creating future assets raised serious ethical questions. My writings circulated among criminal justice reform advocates who used them to push for policy changes. Paige visited me monthly during my imprisonment. She was the only relationship in my life that felt real, born from our mutual destruction. We'd both been forced to sacrifice everything for other people's crimes. Our conversations in the visiting room became the only honest human connection I had left. The legal system eventually established new protections preventing the use of children in long-term federal operations. The policy changes came too late for me, but might protect future generations from similar manipulation. My case became a cautionary tale about the intersection of family crime and government overreach. My mother received life in prison for murder and conspiracy. The procurement fraud network collapsed entirely, with dozens of conspirators convicted. The investigation revealed corruption reaching into state government and major corporations. Everyone involved faced justice, except those already dead. I served 18 months before being released on good behavior. The world I emerged into felt alien after everything I'd learned about my life. Every childhood memory was tainted by the knowledge of its artificial construction. I struggled to determine which parts of my identity were genuine versus those implanted by design. Paige had adopted my sister's children during my incarceration. My sister's mental health had deteriorated after losing custody, leaving her unable to care for them. Paige provided the stable home they needed, using her immunity agreement's financial provisions to support them properly. The children thrived under Paige's care, unaware of the complex history that had brought them together. She raised them with the dedication she'd shown her own son, creating a family from the wreckage of our interconnected tragedies. Watching them grow became a small source of hope in the aftermath. My relationship with Paige evolved into something neither of us had expected. We understood each other's losses in ways no one else could. Both of us had been forced to betray everything we believed in to survive other people's crimes. That shared experience created a bond stronger than traditional relationships. We never discussed the future or made plans beyond each day. Both of us knew that some prisons were inherited, passed down through generations like genetic conditions. The key was choosing which cells you'd accept and which doors you'd keep trying to unlock. The investigation had revealed that justice and truth sometimes destroyed more than they healed. Every revelation had created new victims, spreading pain in ever-widening circles. My father's real crime hadn't been the fraud or even grooming me as a witness. His deepest sin was teaching me that lies could protect anyone when they only ever protected the liars. I found work at a small nonprofit helping families affected by federal investigations. My experience made me valuable to those navigating similar situations. The salary barely covered expenses, but the work felt like a small form of redemption. I helped others avoid the traps that had destroyed my family. Paige and I built something resembling a life from the ruins. We shared custody of my sister's children, creating stability they'd never known. Our strange family unit, born from mutual destruction and shared understanding, became the only real thing in a lifetime of fabrications. The truth about my father's death and my mother's crimes had been exposed, but the cost was measured in destroyed lives and broken families. Justice had been served, but it tasted like ash. Some victories came at prices too high to call them wins. Looking back, I understood that my father had been right about one thing. I never did stop digging. Even when the truth threatened to bury me, I kept excavating. That compulsion, whether natural or programmed, had led me through hell to something resembling peace. The children asked questions sometimes about their biological parents and our complicated history. Paige and I answered honestly but carefully, giving them truth in doses they could handle. We refused to continue the cycle of lies that had destroyed so many lives. My mother died in prison 3 years later, taking any remaining secrets to her grave. I didn't attend the funeral. Paige and I took the children to the beach instead, building sandcastles that would inevitably be claimed by the tide. Some endings were better acknowledged through absence than presence. The federal investigation that had shaped my entire existence finally closed. Boxes of evidence were sealed and archived, becoming historical records of corruption and manipulation. My life had been reduced to case numbers and file folders, but I'd found something real in the aftermath. Paige's son graduated from his specialized program and moved into a group home with support services. She could finally visit him freely, the court restrictions lifted after years of compliance. Watching their reunion reminded me that some prisons did have keys, even if finding them took decades. We settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. Morning routines, homework help, birthday parties that weren't staged for surveillance. The ordinary moments I'd never truly experienced in childhood became precious in their authenticity. Each unstaged day was a small rebellion against my engineered past. The story of my family's destruction became a cautionary tale in law enforcement training. Federal agents studied our case to understand the ethical boundaries of long-term operations. My childhood served as an example of what not to do when developing assets. I sometimes wondered if my father had known how it would end when he started grooming me. Had he imagined this outcome? His wife in prison, his son psychologically shattered but rebuilding, his grandchildren raised by a woman he'd betrayed? His recordings never revealed whether he'd considered the long-term consequences. Paige and I never married or formalized our relationship. Labels felt meaningless after everything we'd experienced. We were partners in the truest sense, bound by shared trauma and mutual understanding. The children called us both by our first names, creating their own definitions of family. The nonprofit work expanded as more families sought help navigating federal investigations. I developed programs teaching people their rights and helping them understand the long-term impacts on children. My expertise came from lived experience rather than formal training. Some nights I still dreamed about testifying, reliving the moment I chose truth over family loyalty. The dreams weren't nightmares anymore, just echoes of a pivotal decision. I'd chosen to end the cycle of lies, accepting the consequences that choice demanded. My sister achieved stability after years of treatment. She remained part of our unconventional family, grateful that Paige had provided what she couldn't. The children maintained relationships with their biological mother, while understanding why they couldn't live with her. The final truth was that some prisons were inherited, and others were chosen. My father had built cells for his entire family, but I'd selected my own confinement when I pursued the truth. The key difference was that chosen prisons sometimes had doors that opened from the inside. Paige understood this better than anyone. We'd both selected our cells, hers protecting a son she couldn't raise, mine exposing parents who'd never truly loved me. Those choices had destroyed us individually, but somehow created something sustainable together. The children grew up knowing they were loved, even if their family structure defied easy explanation. They learned that truth mattered more than comfort, that chosen families could be stronger than blood, and that some inheritances were better refused than claimed. My father's legacy wasn't the fraud or the grooming, or even the truth he'd died protecting. His real inheritance was teaching me that lies never protected anyone worth protecting. That lesson, learned through decades of pain, became the foundation for whatever honest life I managed to build. In the end, Paige and I found peace not through forgetting, but through accepting. We accepted that justice and truth sometimes destroyed more than they healed. We accepted that some prisons were inherited while others were chosen. Most importantly, we accepted that the key to surviving either was knowing which doors you'd keep trying to unlock and which ones you'd finally agreed to close. So after all that drama, they basically ended up as the world's most complicated roommate situation. Hey kids, remember your mom who's also not your mom but kind of is, and I'm the person who sent everyone to jail but now makes your lunch? This has been quite the wild ride from elevator breakdowns to family secrets bigger than my coffee addiction. Thanks for sticking with me through all these twists and turns.